So, Chris, we talk about 5.5 as an over/under. Let's talk about what could be key in reaching that number and getting well past it. Let's go with the offense. So, it doesn't have to be a unit necessarily, but what about the offense could we even term maybe whether it's a concern, an X factor, a key for you when you look at the offense?
Mark, it's got to be the offensive line. And I know people get so tired of hearing about that. Everybody wants to talk about the skill positions. And listen, you've upgraded at every single position. I mean, I think even at running back, losing Kevin Harris and Zaquandre White, you lose a lot of production in regards to your ball carriers. But you add Christian Beal-Smith from Wake Forest, who led a really potent Demon Deacons attack last year. Marshawn Lloyd returns. He's now 2 years off of his injury. You would think he's primed, the former 5-star recruit. He's primed to have his best year in Garnet and Black. You've got Lavassier Carroll, the transfer from Georgia. Oh, by the way, you've got Juju McDowell, who I think is the most underrated player on the offense. All he does is average 10 yards per carry every time he touches it. Balled out in the bowl game against North Carolina. So I think you're going to be fine at running back. You'll be strong there once again. Wide receiver, you upgraded immensely. Again, Josh Van's a guy that doesn't get talked about enough. He's been a sort of overshadowed because you've added guys like Antoine Wells and Corey Rucker from the transfer portal, and then what Nicaryon Joyner did in the bowl game. But, oh, by the way, Josh Van was one of the most explosive players on the outside in the SEC last year. You had Stogner at tight end. Of course, I didn't even mention Jaheim Bell, by the way, who may be the best player nobody's talking about in the SEC. But it all comes back to the offensive line. Mark, here's a crazy stat for you. South Carolina's offensive line last year, they produced just 6 100-yard rushing games in 13 tries a year ago. Also one of the league's worst at pass protection, allowing 31 sacks. And, of course, oh, by the way, you add Spencer Rattler under center. It all comes back to the offensive line, man. The Gamecocks return a lot of experience. All 5 of their guys have started. I think 4 of the 5 were your starting offensive line last year, and all 5 have started at some point. But as you know, Mark, what is experience if it's not good experience? I'd rather have a talented 5-star player who has tons of upside with no experience than a guy who's been there for 4 years that's just proven to me he stinks. You know what I mean? Like experience, I think, is something that at times is overvalued in some ways. It's important, but it can be overvalued. But it's going to come down to the offensive line, and it's also going to come down to Marcus Satterfield, the Gamecocks offensive coordinator, because I will say this. While we look at the offensive line as a potential liability, I don't think you can use that as an excuse this year, Mark, because now going into the season, last year it was shocking how bad the offensive line played because in 2020, you paved the way for Kevin Harris, who led the SEC in rushing, and he had that great year on the ground. We expected the O-line to be a strength, and it wasn't. Well, now if going in the season, hey, our offensive line might be suspect, you've got to find a way to scheme around that. It's just simply not going to be good enough to say, well, our offensive line just isn't where it needs to be. Well, figure out a way to get it to where it needs to be. Put Spencer Rattler and your guys in positions to make plays. Find a way to get the ball out quickly. Find the run plays that work. You know what I mean? Don't ask your guys to do something they're not capable of doing. That was something last year that schematically, I talked to guys, former offensive linemen at South Carolina. They felt like it's too complex. They're asking the offensive linemen to do too much. So again, hey, as much as the game changes and we can talk about spread and up tempo and skill position players, it all comes down to the big uglies up front. That, to me, is the key to not just the offense, but for South Carolina's football season. If they're going to have the type of year they want, win 7, 8, God forbid, maybe more games, the offensive line is going to have to play immensely better than it did a year ago.